So, Reg here, and you're just in time for a little rant.
This is a world.
This is a world premiere.
This is a world.
I've had an interesting couple of weeks on my YouTube channel. I posted some videos a couple of weeks ago about Ghazi Kudzo, and I promise you this is not a video about Ghazi Kudzo, but this is more about some reactions that I got to that Ghazi Kudzo video. I had for the most part, people were fairly intelligent, and their responses started some really interesting and engaging dialogue about what racism is and about how people might be affected by racism. But there were a couple of viewers whose responses and reactions were a little bit disturbing. Those videos were simply trying to outline the nature of white supremacy, what white supremacy is, and how there may be people who are not identified as white, who may feel anger, who may feel resentment, who may carry bitterness, or a sense of outrage, injustice over the fact of the nature of the existence of white supremacy and how it plays out in the United States. So first of all, when people hear white supremacy, they might immediately think about a member of the Ku Klux Klan or a neo-Nazi or any of those racially based hate groups that I outlined in some of my previous videos. When I talk about white supremacy, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about in terms of white supremacy is this idea that in the United States it is somehow better to be white. This isn't necessarily an attitude that's carried around consciously by any individual, but it is the result of messages that are received every day during our lives that may be telling us that in this country you're better off if you're born with skin that is lighter, if your hair is blonde, if your eyes are blue. What I want to look at are the concrete examples of where white people or people who identify as white just do better in the United States. And I want to start just looking at the country itself. If you look at the country in terms of the 930 plus million acres that make up the United States, 98% of that acreage, of the land mass itself, is owned by people who identify as white. If you look at the wealth, who is governing in that society? So if you look at just who governs, and I can just show you a picture. Here's a picture of our current Congress. Here's a picture of the House of Representatives, and who do you see in that picture? And here's a picture of the Senate. And who do you see represented in that picture? So even though this person is the President of the United States, we all know that we have a system of checks and balances, and this person can't do anything without the consent and the cooperation of these people. And they're white. Now also, when you want to look at just, wanting to just be alive, just living. So who's living the longest in the United States? And if you look at the numbers, you see that the people who are going to live longer in the United States are the people who happen to be born with white skin, or skin that is considered white skin. And black people right now, or people who are identified as black, are the sickest people on the planet right now. So when you look at who owns everything, who's controlling everything, and what are the benefits, the life benefits that people are getting from being either white or black, you see that if you're white, your chances are better of having a great life. Your chances are better of having a great life. Now, the reason why is the question. Now, it's not necessarily that that's anyone's fault, right? It might not be anyone's fault that it happens to be better to be white. And so I start to ask myself the question. So, is it better to be white just because people who identify as white are better human beings? They know better how to operate, how to function in the world, and how to have better lives. And then I also can look at, maybe it's that there's a problem with the system. It might not be anyone's fault, but maybe there's a rupture. Maybe there's a little switch that happens to keep clicking the right way so that it's benefiting people who just happen to be white. No real reason or cause behind it. And it just happens to keep clicking in the opposite direction so that the benefits don't go to people who happen to be identified or labeled as black. So it might not be anybody's fault. It just might be this weird kink in the system that just seems to, white people always seem to luck out, so it doesn't have anything to do with their person themselves, or doesn't, it's not necessarily that you're a better human being for being white, but just like maybe you're just really lucky. Or we can say that there's someone who's manipulating that switch so that it's benefiting people who identify as white and at the expense of people who are identifying as black. And so this is just something that I want to present to you, that it's not a question of people intentionally trying to hurt others because of their race, but it just is, white supremacy is this idea that it just is better to be white. Now, I personally think that that's an ideology that we should dismantle. I don't think that people who are born white are better, and I don't think most white people think of themselves as better for being white. But in our society, your chances of doing well are improved if you are white. So that's it for this video. Like it if you like it, comment, share, subscribe. This is Reg signing off. Love yourself. Peace.
And I love myself. The world is a ghetto, big guns and